Hello, everyone. My name is Jasper Schibrein, and I'm a professor at the University of Southern Denmark. And I will talk to you about built environment interventions to promote physical activity, something we work a lot with in our research group, where we're looking at how we can create more active living. First of all, a little background on why we're working with physical activity and why physical inactivity, not being active enough, is such a large problem. And it was estimated that globally, if we could eliminate all inactivity, so all people in the whole world would live up to the physical activity recommendations, we could avoid 5.3 million deaths annually. So physical inactivity is a major contributor to mortality. And if you look at the levels of people that actually live up to the recommendations, you can also understand a little bit why. So 27.5% of adults do not meet the recommendations, and 81% of adolescents do not meet recommendations. And especially the latter is worrying because there are future generations. If they are not active enough as adolescents, how will they be as adults? And the World Health Organization, late 2020, launched their updated guidelines on physical activity. And I think one of the main changes with these guidelines compared to the previous version is that they are very clear in the messaging, saying every move counts. So not just sports, not just exercise, not just activity that really gets your heart pumping and gets you sweating, but every move counts. And especially the importance of walking and cycling and these everyday activities that we in our research group call active living is considered to be very important for people's health. And that's also where the link to the built environment comes in, because these everyday activities, they are very much related to how our built environment looks. And WHO already realized that a number of years ago, where they've said there are four main policy areas that you need to work with if you want to create more active people. And one of them was creating active environments, where they list 5 quite specific actions that cities can take and health policies have to think about when they want to create more active environments. Policy integration, looking at the built environment policies, planning policies, how can we think about creating more conducive environments for being active? That has to do also with infrastructure, with safety, but also putting in more public open spaces where people can be active, parks, green spaces, design in general. How do our cities look? A number of years ago, together with colleagues in many countries around the world, we did a large cross-sectional study where we looked at 14 cities, very different cities around the world, to look at which features of the built environment are actually related to people's physical activity levels. And these were 14 very different cities, ranging from low-income southern cities in Latin America, to high-income North American cities, to European cities, to very high-density Asian cities. So very different cities. But what was consistent across these cities was that a higher number of parks was associated with physical activity, a higher number of public transit density, access, higher intersection density, so more connected road networks, and higher residential density. And taking all these factors together, if we then looked at the most activity-friendly neighborhoods compared with the least activity-friendly neighborhoods, we could see that the difference could be up to 90 minutes per week. And if you know that the recommendations are 150 minutes per week for adults, then 90 minutes a week simply by how the neighborhood where you live differs is a very, very big difference. So in a cross-sectional study, we can see that the built environment does make a difference for physical activity. Obviously, when you talk about interventions in the built environment, it is a little bit more difficult, because how do you do a good intervention where you change the built environment? That's difficult. It takes a lot of time. So one of the tools we often use in our research group is conducting a natural experiment. So using an event that is happening anyway, so that we don't control as researchers, but using that event to study the effects on the behavior. So we do a pre and post study with a control group, but we don't actually control what is happening. So in this case, about 10 years ago, 12 by now, I think, the city of Copenhagen started a large city renewal project where they had planned to renovate a number of public open spaces. And we had the opportunity to go in and measure on children, 10 to 16-year-old children before the intervention and then afterwards. And these were some of the examples of the changes that happened in this neighborhood. So these are all examples of facilities that were created by the city of Copenhagen. And when we looked at these about 500 children that we included in our study, before and after the changes, we could see that these children that lived in this area, they spent more time there. They became more active. So I think this was one of the first studies, at least in our group, where we could really show a change in physical activity behavior for adolescents in relation to how the built environment had changed. A few years later, we did an experiment, and this time it was a real experiment where we as researchers controlled much more what was happening. In this case, we focused on schoolyards to very much try to get rid of this this problem you see here on this image. And this is a real image. It's a few years old. Most schools in Denmark now have policies that children cannot use their mobile phones anymore. But a few years ago, this was a real situation in recess. But in this project, we had a number of schools that submitted ideas, proposals for how they wanted to change their schoolyards. This was one of the before pictures taken on a rainy day. So it looks extra sad, I guess. But this school, after a long process of a competition and selecting the best projects, this was one of the schools where a new schoolyard was realized. And again, here we were able to measure with devices, so with an accelerometer and a GPS device, we were able to measure how active were the children when their schoolyard looks like this, the pre-situation, and then some pictures. This is the post-situation. This is how the schoolyard looks now. How active are children in the schoolyard after changes? And what we could see here, we could also map sort of which type of facilities are being used, where are children active, and again, it made a difference. So we could see that on average, children became about 10 minutes more active in the new schoolyards than before the intervention. We could clearly see, which was very useful for future interventions, that some areas were much more popular for girls, others for boys, and one of the areas that was very popular for teenage girls, which typically is a difficult group to get to be more active during school time, was this video screen where girls could play music videos. It was very, very popular for dancing. So a successful intervention for teenage girls as well. And if you are interested in this type of built environment interventions, and there are more examples, these were just two of our projects shown here. There is more information to be had. For example, the City of New York has I think a very good website, Center for Active Design, where there's a lot of guidance to be had on other projects and other ideas for how can you create more physically active cities. Two of their main publications here, Active Design Guidelines primarily for buildings, but also Building Healthy Places, a toolkit, which is very much more focused on neighborhoods. Also from our Australian colleagues, in this case from the Australian Heart Foundation, very good guidance material on how you can create more active societies by thinking about your built environment. Finally, I wanted to mention something that is very much, I think, up and coming, and in my mind, one of the most promising concepts in built environment changes that could be very influential for physical activity. That is the 20-minute neighborhood, or sometimes also called the 15-minute neighborhood. And basically, the idea is that you have very complete neighborhood with all daily functions close by within a 20-minute walk or cycle ride. And this concept could really make a major difference in physical activity in cities, in my mind. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your conference.